Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name is David, this is David K Reacts, and here on this channel I ramble with articulation, I hope, about a variety of different visual, audio and musical media that I check out. And normally I would do something a little different to what I'm doing today, but this is a first for me. Today, I'm going to be checking out a piece of music I am already very familiar with, but I'm going to be checking it out in multiple variations. And actually, at the end of this video, there will be a genuine reaction analysis to a version of this I have not heard yet. So there is still that element in this video. But I'm doing something different. The piece of music in question is called One-Winged Angel and is from Final Fantasy VII, composed by Nobuo Uematsu. And this is a piece of music that has... well, I'll introduce it in a minute, but let's just say it has been formative to me as a musician, as a composer, as an appreciator of music in general. So this is going to be a different video. This is the first video of mine you are seeing. This is unique. It's not to say there won't be more of them, but this is my first time doing something like this. First thing I'm going to say is welcome back to my channel. Welcome if this is your first time here. If it is, the way this usually works is I watch through a video from beginning to end. I comment and emote over the top of it, then I go back again and watch it a second time, this time pausing and interrupting and offering what commentary and analysis I feel I can, based on having watched and heard it before, and the foreknowledge of or rather, having just watched and heard it, and the foreknowledge of having seen it once before. That will happen at the end of this video, and everything that I'm doing is marked with chapter entries in the timeline down below, so if you want to jump to a particular point in the video, please feel free to do so. If you do enjoy this, please like the video, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and if you would care to donate to support the channel, you can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com/DavidKReacts, where you can leave a one-off donation, patreon.com/DavidKReacts, where there is a single tier of $2 Canadian to support the channel, or you can leave a super thanks here on YouTube. Any of those very gratefully received, but none of them necessary. So this... I guess one thing I would like to mention off the bat, this is my first time trying a scripted video. I am sure I will deviate here and there, but most of what I'm going to say has been pre-written until the reaction analysis of One-Winged Angel Reborn at the end of this video. If you would like to skip to any part, like I said, links in the chapter breakdown in the timeline below. Also check out the description where I have information about the pieces and potentially a few links as well to the originals. If you've been watching my videos this month, it will be no surprise to you that I'm a huge fan of music from video games. I grew up with it, and I think most importantly perhaps to me is it's some of the first music I formed an opinion on myself, in the sense that I wasn't given it, I wasn't told it was great. I came across it myself and I formed my own opinions. It has been advancing at a crazy rate. Back in the day, sound channels within the console itself had to be given over to creating not only the sound effects for the game, but the music as well. So composers were extremely limited into how much they could actually use. You could add, for example, a square wave sound and a sawtooth wave sound and some noise for the drums. So you'd have two melodic lines and the drum kit. That might be it if the game had enough other sound effects. The number of channels was partly determined by the game, but also determined by the console. You have 8-bit music, 16-bit music, all that kind of stuff. It's referring to the number of channels in the console. Limitation, however, as they say, breeds creativity. And back then, you had extraordinarily memorable music being made. Composers had to focus on notable melodies because they were the cornerstone of such music. There was actually a gaming channel called Screw Attack, the archive for which is now... available on Rooster Teeth, the website Rooster Teeth, which featured an article called The Top 10 Video Game Themes Ever. That was released to YouTube, at least, on October the 17th, 2008. And their number 5 entry began like this. Sorry, I just had to cut there because although I preloaded all of these videos, I got an advert immediately. That might happen a couple of times in this video. If it does, I will cut the advert out and restart the video here. So, Screw Attack's number 5 entry began like this. Excuse me. And they pointed out that most people who were listening to that video would know exactly what was coming. That's all you needed to hear because of the iconic intro. There's multiple reasons for that. One is that the actual music itself is iconic. We recognize that as being the Super Mario Bros. Theme for World 1-1 on the NES. The second thing is, it's the sound. That that sort of whatever the sound is, those sounds are completely associated with that piece of music, even though lots of other games use them, I'm sure. That, to me, says Super Mario 1-1, that combination of sounds. The point is, video game music flew under the radar for a long time. That piece of music is iconic, but for its time it sounded weird. Beeps, boops, and psst came together to create music that sounded kind of futuristic, but also kind of archaic, all at the same time. You know, we had cassette tapes and could record pieces of music and hear them played back by a live orchestra, so this electronic format was a little bit unknown. As it evolved along with the games around it, it came to be more recognised, and nowadays it's kind of truly remarkable what you can hear when you're playing a game. Enter Final Fantasy. Age 12, I was used to playing Dune 2, the couple of stock NES games, Duck Hunt, Super Mario Bros., and a couple of entries on the PlayStation 1 that had reasonable but otherwise unremarkable soundtracks. My best friend Charlie had been telling me about this game he had got called Final Fantasy VII. He would gush about it in depth. The plot, the set pieces, the awesome characters, the moves they could use in battle, all this kind of stuff. And I imagined what it must be like. Found out later I was completely wrong. Momentary tangent, but the idea of a diesel punk RPG wasn't something I could imagine at the time. I wasn't really into... I was very kind of, I was 12. I knew fantasy, I knew sci-fi, and that was kind of the limit of what I was sort of aware of. So when he described a massive plate falling and crushing a part of a town, in my head I thought it was sort of an outcrop of rock leaning out over the edge of a cliff, not the upper level of a giant metal city. But anyway... Finally, we found time for him to come over, and he brought the game with him. This game came on 3 CDs. Now, that in and of itself was extraordinary. I'd played plenty of PlayStation games at his house. I had the couple that I owned. They were all on 1 CD. This was on 3. When you got to the end of one of the CDs, you actually had to eject it from the system, put the next CD in, and carry on. I put the first of these in, I got past the studio stingers that started everything off, as they always did, and I was met with this. Now, this was not the most groundbreaking piece of music I had heard. But it does kind of, it had my attention. It's still impressive. And if I skip on a little bit... you had all these beautiful sounds. It was still very synthesized, but it was, I was paying attention now. Then I clicked start. I heard the main theme of the game. I saw the reveal of the title as this beautiful cinematic as the camera pans back from the aforementioned metal city, which is called Midgar. It would pan back from the city out to a full landscape shot of the city, and then with a crash of the cymbals and this very strident theme, the title came up, Final Fantasy VII. And the camera started to go back into a different part of the city, and you saw a train rushing through. This was all in pre-rendered video sequence. You saw a train rushing through the city, and as you came into the platform, these 2 guards, rendered in the game's gameplay visual, were standing in this video. And then as the train came to a halt, there was a slight frame skip, and the video switched, and the background, the final frame, if you like, of the train in the station became the scene we were playing across. It was this beautifully pre-rendered back scene with these sort of more polygonal characters in the way. And you took control. Now that That was a piece of music to stop me in my tracks. I don't know whether it was kind of like the piano effect that was going on there. They had this wonderful, the boom, 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 boom on the timpani that were happening there, which sounded a little more real. This is obviously synthesized instruments, but it sounds good. It's leagues from where we were previously. I don't remember how long I played, or maybe Charlie played and I watched. But at the end of all of that, despite the awesome plot, the set pieces, the characters, and the moves they were using, my overwhelming thought was, yeah, but that music is something else. That thought has never left my mind since. A brief history of Final Fantasy music before I move on to the piece that I'm going to be talking about today. The first game was released in 1987 on the NES or the Famicom in Japan, and it would make its way to North America in 1990. It broke the mold for what video game RPGs were doing at that point. And part of what made it so amazing was the large, beautifully composed music library, which included a certain piece we just heard. For some reason, starts very quiet. Now, that was extraordinary, and there's only two lines playing there in harmony at any given moment, so 2 channels of music that are being played. That score was composed by Nobuo Uematsu, and it was phenomenal, the game's score, I mean, ranging the full gamut of emotions, perfectly describing the actions that were taking place in the plot, the battles you were fighting, whatever it happened to be. Over time, that game became a huge franchise, though it began slowly, admittedly. Final Fantasies II and III actually came out in Japan on the Famicom, but were not released in North America until way later. 4, 5, and 6 came to the Super Famicom, the Super NES, but only 4 and 6 came over here to North America, and they were named 2 and 3, respectively, which kind of made sense with the North American release schedule, but was a bizarre move that now that they're all available over here really confuses some people today. You say, oh, have you played Final Fantasy II? And they think you're talking about the NES game when it's actually 4. Whereas for me, I'd say, well, have you played Final Fantasy IV? And they look confused because they don't know what it is. Still happens today. There were some spin-offs during that time as well, but this video is going to concentrate, for the most part, with a couple of exceptions later on the main franchise. Music was a core part of these games too, all of them. Some phenomenal, adventurous, some experimental sounds. One moment there might be a piece of ragtime being played on a piano, the next moment it's verging on metal or techno, and then there were cinematic orchestral pieces, all realized with these 8 or 16-bit chips. Throughout every single entry, Uematsu did not disappoint. So, for example, here is the opening piece of music once you click the start button on Final Fantasy IV. Now, this is a very martial-sounding piece of music, which is perfectly suited to the fact that it basically it deals with the country's air force, more or less. And you start with this image of these 5 airships flying over the scenery below you. The music fits perfectly. It's a wonderful opening to the game. Final Fantasy VI even featured the first example of a piece of sung music in the series, with the incredible Aria di Mezzo Carattere, which was an opera in the game that the player took part in. They chose the lyrics that were sung by the protagonist of the opera, Maria, as played by one of the playable characters, Celis, who has got herself into the opera, and it sounded something like this. It was a bold move to include a piece of sung music, and that was, while that was going on, the text of the lyrics in the opera, including the ones you chose, are being played on the screen, so you know what is being sung, supposedly. The doors were blown off when Final Fantasy VII was released. Now, before I continue with this, I do want to warn of potential spoilers for all iterations of Final Fantasy VII and the other various games and media that are mentioned here. This stuff, to varying extents, I am going into some small amount of detail, and if you're going to play one of these games, I would advise jumping past that point if you don't want any spoilers at all. That's not to say that all of them are going to be major. Some of them will be, some of them won't. So, coming out in 1997, Final Fantasy VII was a game on PlayStation 1, and it brought the series to the North American mainstream in a way that I think, personally, although I don't know the full history, but I feel like previous games in the franchise have only really managed since then. Yes, they found their niche, but I think this one kind of really hit the mainstream. In brief, and with massive oversimplifications for the sake of said brevity, it tells the tale of Cloud Strife, who is a magically enhanced individual who joins a resistance movement fighting back against the Shinra Electric Power Company, which is sucking the life energy out of the planet through the ground to use as fuel for these giant reactors. The city of Midgar is ringed by 8 powerful reactors, and they're basically slowly killing the planet. As this group, Avalanche, the resistance group, as they fight back, they uncover a much greater threat in the form of Sephiroth, who was another of these enhanced soldiers, who, was a perfectly useful tool to Shinra, but didn't have a full understanding of how he was created, and he finds that out. He's been searching this whole time to understand more about himself, and he finds out what happened. And when that happens, he doesn't take it well, and he wishes to merge with the planet's life stream, this force that the reactors are sucking out, to become a god, which results in him using a very powerful magic to summon a world-ending meteor. At the same time, Cloud and party, including a mysterious girl called Aerith, who turns out to be the final living descendant of an ancient race, fight back. In the process, while Aerith is killed by Sephiroth permanently, which was quite a shock at the time, it's one of the most memorable scenes in video games, I think, she does succeed in transferring her consciousness into the life stream and casting the powerful Holy spell, and that, after it eventually breaks through Sephiroth's restraints, at the very last second, of course, will save the planet from Meteor. The subject of today's discussion is Sephiroth, created by scientific experiments that were based upon a bunch of false assumptions, they weren't known at the time, they turned out to be false. He was forced to endure a lot of pain as a child by his because his creator, who's a mad scientist named Professor Hojo, who you also meet in the game, tried to make him more and more powerful. All he wanted was to find his mother, but because he didn't understand his own history, but he was forced to basically become the poster boy of Shinra's recruitment drive. They made up a bunch of things that he did and started calling him a hero, and he hadn't even fought yet. He did end up fighting for them, and he discovered the truth about his creation, at which point he snaps, and that's where all of this wanting to become a god thing starts coming into it. He feels like he must be Cetra. The Cetra of this ancient race, and the misunderstanding was that Genova, who's his mother, kind of, this gets confusing, was a Cetra. She wasn't. And so he does not have that legacy that Aerith does. But I'm going to skip ahead for a moment. I want to go back to Final Fantasy VII and the outstanding musical score for the game. Because what we're going to be talking about here is a piece of fight music. And this game was rammed full of good fight music. So, for example, the basic battle theme. It's an incredible piece of music. Plays through the majority of the battles you fight in the game every time you start one. Chances are that's the piece of music that's going to start playing. If you're coming across a bigger bad, one of the bosses in the game, you actually get this very, very cool piece of boss music. Remember those two. They're not going to be relevant for a while, but they will come back. But, for me, the standout piece of music was yet to come. Sephiroth was being treated the same way that Steven Spielberg treated Jaws. He was rarely seen in person. In fact, this was a little misunderstood back at the time because the translation wasn't great. But you actually only see the real Sephiroth in the game twice. Once in the middle, and then once for the very final battle. There are other appearances of him, but he could control clones of himself around the world, which were basically anybody else who had been injected with the cells of Genova, the so-called mother that I mentioned earlier. When you came to fight him at the end, you got this fantastic piece of music called Birth of a God. And I know there are people out there who will actually hold it up as being a better piece of music than this one. And that's perfectly fine. I personally don't. But then you hit what, to me, at least, is Uematsu's masterpiece, One Winged Angel. That's not One Winged Angel. This is One Winged Angel. Now, this very powerful piece of music plays over the final major boss fight with Sephiroth. He's hovering above you in a form known as Safer Sephiroth, replete with one single wing. And this fight is hard, like hard as nails hard, if you don't know what you're doing. What also makes it harder is the previous iteration of him, where Birth of a God is playing. You can actually make things easier on yourself by having multiple groups fight that version of the boss. Unbeknownst to all of us at the time, because the internet wasn't a thing yet, the more groups you used against Bizarro Sephiroth, he was called, the more powerful Safer Sephiroth became. So you could really make this fight tough. So having this epic music behind was absolutely ideal for what was trying to be achieved there. Now, one of the great things about this is how many different musical moments we heard just then in that score, and I'm going to play a few more in a second. Nobuo Uematsu has actually said in an interview he created a variety of motifs for this song, and then stitched them all together to form what became One Winged Angel, which is a fascinating way of creating a piece of music. So here are just a few more pieces. I'm going to let this run for about a minute, and then I will carry on. I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? And just when I felt I could not be more astounded by this soundtrack, the pièce de la résistance reached my ears. Now, this jumps back a little. This section comes in between the 2 bits of music I just played. But we got this. Actual singing. Now, that's nothing nowadays, but in 1997, that was a huge deal. Of course, by this point, tracks were being embedded into CDs, so it was just a question of playing back an audio file, just like putting a CD into a stereo and playing it back that way. So, of course, singing was possible. But what is also worth noting is that in this game, there is no spoken dialogue. All the dialogue comes in text on the screen. So there is no actual character voice anywhere in the game. There is no any voice anywhere in the game except this very last piece of music, 45 hours into this experience. Spoken dialogue, incidentally, would not arrive until Final Fantasy X, which was the first one on the PlayStation 2. Then also, having already had my mind melted by the fact that we were dealing with singing, you get the most menacing part of the song, which is this. Having that sound blasting out over the climactic fight of the game was almost unbelievable to me. For days after, and I do not jest, I was going around the house just singing Veni, Veni, Venias, ne memori facias, which incidentally translates as come, come, oh come, do not let me die. Now, the yearning to be more than just a memory would be something that Sephiroth would exclaim his desire for on many occasions and in many different mediums. The lyrics, incidentally, with the exception of the name Sephiroth, were lifted from Carl Orff's Carmina Burana, with Uematsu having been inspired by music such as that, Psycho with the dia, dia, dia at the top of all of this, and Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which if you've ever heard it, makes a lot of sense. And if you haven't, it's just as chaotic as what we're listening to right now, in fact, more so. There are other such lyrics, such as Estuans interius ira vehementi, which means burning inside with violent anger. Sors imanis et inanis, translating to fate, monstrous and empty. And gloriosa generosa, meaning glorious, noble. Potentially glorious, generous, according to some translations. All of these are lyrics taken from Carmina Burana. But it's also easy to see why Uematsu would have thought, these are perfect for a villain's battle music. One does have to wonder, and I'm curious about this, if at the time Uematsu or the game developer Square, the company, had any idea what they were onto with this, or the fact that so many videos are still being made about this piece of music today. This theme has followed Sephiroth almost everywhere he goes, and he goes a lot of places, to be honest. To date, he has appeared in Final Fantasy VII, of course, Advent Children, which was an animated movie sequel, we'll come back to that, the prequel games Crisis Core and Ever Crisis, the Dissidia series, which are fighting spin-offs of the entire Final Fantasy franchise, the Kingdom Hearts series, which are set in a slightly bizarre but very cool Disney Final Fantasy crossover world, and more recently appeared, actually, as a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And if you were anywhere near the internet the day that he got revealed, you probably know about it. And that's not to mention there were many other spin-off appearances and mobile games and things like that, but I'm ignoring most of those for this video. Before I do get to the reaction part of this video, I want to examine why I think One Winged Angel has survived so well as a piece of music, despite simply being excellent. There's more to it than that. So the next time most of us would hear this music would be 8 years after the original game came out in Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. This was a beautifully crafted CGI movie, and it took up the plot 2 years after the game. As the movie went on, it became clear that Sephiroth was behind most of what was happening, despite apparently having been killed by Cloud at the end of the game. He's not in most of the movie. He's in the original version, a 6-minute section of the movie towards the end for one giant fight, and that's it. But his influence is all throughout it. And so in a final battle against the leader of the antagonist trios, a guy named Kadaj, Sephiroth would suddenly inhabit him, Kadaj, and fight Cloud personally. So there's a fantastic moment where Cloud is coming down with a giant sword. His sword is abnormally large. And he's coming down with this, and he's going to strike down Kadaj, and Kadaj holds his blade up to protect himself, and as the weapons hit, boom, Sephiroth has taken Kadaj's place. Sephiroth's sword is possibly even sillier. And Sephiroth comes to fight Cloud personally, swearing yet again he will never be a memory, and we get a version of One Winged Angel performed by a real orchestra this time, and supported by Nobuo Uematsu's band, the Black Mages, and we get this. To this point, more or less the same piece of music. That's solo. You can hear this version is heavier, it's angrier, it gives a weight to Sephiroth's vengeance and his determination. And the entrance of the metal band and the additional bars added here and there kind of really power up the song. Also, the lyrics have been changed. There are new ones there, I'm not going to go through all the Latin, but don't remain in memory. Which of course is Sephiroth's desire not to remain in memory. Fierce anger and pain, and also come my son, come here, give me death once more. And then on top of that, there's a very powerful descant in the final chorus that says, he who invited death was born with an ill-fated punishment. Don't call his name. The second advent. Very, very powerful stuff. It's remarkable stuff. It's worth actually noting that Advent Children Complete, which is sort of the director's cut version, added something like 3.5 minutes to the battle with Sephiroth, and therefore to this version of the song. I'm not going to go into that here. That's just one layer too deep for this video. 2 years later, however, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Final Fantasy VII, I beg your pardon, came out, and along with it came, I think, what is the most unsettled version of One Winged Angel, which was entitled The World's Enemy. And this kind of reflected Sephiroth's more confused but also younger mind. This is, as I said, prequel to Final Fantasy VII. I can't remember by how many years now. it kind of finishes up very close to the beginning, but with changes to the construction of the orchestra and kind of consistently adding and removing instruments and moving around who's playing what, it remains functionally the same song, albeit shorter, but the entire vibe of the music changed in a very cool way. It's clear here that Sephiroth's character is dark. We get that, but this version indicates a sort of quirkiness and a mercurial nature as well, and you can hear that in lines such as the xylophone and the flute sort of pairing together up top, or the bassoons getting some audio time in the lower register. It's also got some much darker brass entries than the original sound did, or the original tune did, I guess, and that's going to be something that features later in this video, which is one of the reasons I'm playing this. So this is the world's enemy. Magnificent stuff. I love how, even though we have this more quirky thing that Estuans interius ira vehementi, still sung just as seriously by the chorus. But it's got this quirk to it that I was mentioning before. And as with every version of this tune, yes, there are changes and there are adjustments to the original, but for the most part, this is still fairly close to being the same piece of music rearranged. Even the veni, 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 us lines are sung over pizzicato strings and lots of percussion toys, kind of giving it a more light-hearted feel before it plunges back into darkness, but it is still based on the same piece of music. One thing it's worth mentioning, I'm going to just play a little bit more of this, but that bum, 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 bum. Anyone who watched my Sonic the Hedgehog video on April the 1st heard me mention the fact that one of the things with semitones is if they're used in the right tone, and Jaws we've already referenced it in this, da-dum. It's menacing, it's dark, and so the fact that we're getting that semitone, even though it is a lighter kind of bum, 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 what it's actually playing is still dark. Very unsettled. Interestingly, too, as you heard, it's also worth noting we don't get that powerful bum, bum, bum entry that is the standard introduction to this piece of music right until the end. Right before the repeat starts. So all of this music, for the most part, Advent Children is obviously a movie, so it's different, but all of this music is designed to repeat. So where those 8 dum, or 16, I think it was, the dum, dum, dum ended, and just as it was fading out there, and you heard the xylophone and stuff come back in, that was it repeating back to the beginning. So it's right at the end of the loop that we actually get that. So that's a thought I will come back to later as well. Before we get to the most contemporary versions of this, there are a couple of versions outside of the main releases of the franchise that I want to check out. Distant Worlds is a concert series of Final Fantasy music that travels around the globe. I cannot recommend enough that you go to one of these if it comes near you. They are fantastic. There's also a version called A New World, which is a chamber orchestra version, so much so, I think that's about 20 people usually, or 16 people, something like that. I saw the very first one in London way back in the day for A New World, and I think it was only about 12. So it's a much reduced version of that, but it also superb. If either one of them comes anywhere near you, go see it. But Distant Worlds reinvented the original arrangement once again, and they have their own version just for this concert, keeping the structure of the song much closer to the original, but besides having the obvious benefit of actually being able to listen to live instruments, as we did with Advent Children or Crisis Core, but this is in a concert setting, they move melodic moments to different instruments, or articulate them in a different way. They shift everything around a little, and the percussion in particular. Again, I'm aware that the band joined in Advent Children, but in general, becomes a little more powerful here than it was before, and that's also a trend I'm going to refer back to later. I'm going to just run a little bit of this, just so that you can listen to this. And then this, I believe they also used in Dissidia, which was the fighting game. I think it's the same version, but this is the Distant Worlds iteration of One Winged Angel. Much lighter here. So you hear what I mean? It's kind of similar, but they've moved things around a little. Also, remember that the piano just did there. That will come back too. Oops. The version from A New World is actually a slightly interesting study in and of itself, because the smaller number of instruments that are playing lead to a kind of more aggressive playstyle from everybody to keep that energy level kind of sort of equal to a larger orchestra, essentially. While the effect is sort of more open and a less complete arrangement because there's fewer instruments playing, the way they use things like violin tremolo to keep the tension up is really impressive. See what I mean? If I remember correctly, that's the CD. I think that was actually recorded at the concert I was at. But again, similar things, like the little piano thing still there and what have you, but those trills in the violas and the violins and things like that just kind of help keep things going. It's fascinating for a smaller group to be that effective. Now, I mentioned previously another game that uses Sephiroth is Kingdom Hearts, and they reinvented the music for that too. In this version, there are dark brass sounds and additional sort of embellishments that weren't in the original, but created especially for the fights in these games. On top of that, we get a dissonance over the veni veni venias in the notes that the brass are playing, and that's a theme that might come back a little later anyway. 2 excerpts for this one coming up. Quick to the lyrics this time too. So you hear it has its own unique character, and then this is the Veni Veni Venias section I was talking about. That brass. It's really, really dissonant, and it creates such a powerful, unsettling effect. Really, really enjoy that. It's worth noting Kingdom Hearts 2.5, enter a bunch of suffixes to that name that I don't know. Kingdom Hearts naming conventions are weird. Also had its own version of it, but I'm not going to cover that here. This is kind of as much of a tangent as I'm going to make. The last version I'm going to mention before we get onto the full thing is from the piano collections. This was a series of books that were released that featured piano reductions of key pieces of music from their respective games, about a dozen or so in each case. And One Winged Angel was one of these. And it's interesting because it was created or written, arranged for piano to be played slower because it's a very complicated music, like that thing that the oboes and flutes are playing at the beginning. I can only imagine how quickly you have to move your fingers to play that out. So this is designed to play a lot slower than any of the other versions we've heard, but it allows for focus on some of the motion that's happening in the piece and some of the interesting chords. Because of this, I know that bom, 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 bom at the beginning of the song actually features a really weird combination of notes. The left hand plays an octave of E's, and the right hand is playing E, B flat, and A. So you're getting both a tritone and a semitone played at the same time, which is a very unsettling combination of sounds. And that's one of the reasons it's so effective. Now, whether that's true for all of the orchestral arrangements or whether it was just done for the piano collections, I don't know. I haven't seen an orchestral score for this. But playing this out, you'll hear at the very beginning of this, that's what he's playing. This is Seiji Honda, who's recorded this. And you can hear those details and hear exactly how some of this has been constructed. You could hear there's still sort of a degree of menace kept in this, and actually I think the fact that it's been slowed down so much for the piano adds to that. But it's a remarkable version of this. Anyway, finally, we come to the contemporary remakes. As soon as the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, these were graphically updated and technically cleaned up versions of the first 6 Final Fantasy games. As soon as those remasters began to emerge, and possibly before that, I don't know, I can't remember that far back. Everything from rumors and requests to, frankly, outright demands and threats began to arise about a remake of Final Fantasy VII. Square never said flat out no, or I think they did at one point and then retracted it 6 months later. They really didn't help themselves an awful lot. Doubly so when, as a graphical tech demo for the PlayStation 3, they showed some of that beginning bit with the steam train, updated for PlayStation 3 graphics. And the Final Fantasy fandom as a whole lost its mind, thinking that the PlayStation 3 was going to get a Final Fantasy VII remake. The eventual Final Fantasy VII remake would not land until 2020, which is now 23 years after the original game came out. And it was released on PlayStation 4, and then came out on PlayStation 5 and Windows the next a year later, I think. When it did, it sold like hotcakes, but it wasn't without its own controversy. Firstly, it was revealed it would be part of a trilogy of games that comprised the remake total. So in this case, the player would just leave Midgar, which is you start in Midgar, and many of the instigating events happen there, but you would just leave and then it would finish. That in the original version is about 85% of the first disc of the game. So there's another 15% or so of that disc, and then the entire 2 discs that come after that still had not come out when this remake was released. Secondly, this was not a simple remaster, which is what we'd had previously. This version, the plot diverges significantly from the original story at several points, and I believe that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which came out earlier this year, I have not played it yet because it's not out on PC currently, goes even more left field. But we'll see when I get to it. Anyway, the a lot of stuff had changed. And in the original, the player sees sort of hints of Sephiroth, but doesn't actually even meet a clone of him in battle on the first disc. In Remake, he's the final boss, and the version of One-Winged Angel that plays over that fight is honestly one of the best pieces of music I've ever heard. Remember what I said earlier, that Uematsu had pieced One-Winged Angel together from writing out, it was like piecing a story together. He pieced out motifs and post-it noted them into order. This version, which is entitled One-Winged Angel Rebirth, which is wildly confusing because part 2 of the trilogy, the game itself, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Never mind that. We're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is one of 3. But One-Winged Angel Rebirth. This version takes that original version apart again and reassembles it in a different order, giving us this very kind of chaotic and malevolent piece of music that threatens the player the entire time that they are battling its subject. So right from the start, we get these crashing brass and chorus chords, accompanying just one of those original moments, and certainly not the one that opened the game. Then from there, we go into a wholly new section. So already, sorry, I'm just itching my ear. Already the vocals in this are a very broken up version of the melody from the original. You could also hear that very quietly in the background of that new section before that. Absolutely fascinating. We're getting a little of that fragmentation that we saw in Crisis Core's iteration, but it's got a different meaning now. It's not scattered. It's not, a mind that hasn't settled yet. We come back to this sense of doom, essentially, and it's very, very powerful. When we arrive back at one of the original's most recognizable moments, which happens just a few seconds later, listen to how hard the drums are being played in this version. I mentioned they would be an evolving theme, and here they really start to sound like the players are frankly hitting them as hard as they possibly can. And you just get that, and then we're off somewhere else. We're expecting at that point in time to go into the Estuans Interius section at that point in time. Instead, we've gone somewhere else, totally different once again, into another new section. We then come a little more solidly and lastingly into something that is recognizable. But again, listen to the percussion and the brass hits that come during this. I mean, even though it's recognizable from the original, it's been totally rearranged to begin with, then ends up somewhere completely different with that climbing section, before we get to continue. Finally, we get to Veni Veni Venias, this time accompanied once more by those hammering drums, and it really adds tension and terror to what was already a very sinister piece of music, frankly. hear the little piano again. Notice how we went out of Veni Veni Venias into a totally new section and then back into something familiar and then away again. It keeps coming and going. We even get that descending piano motif, which we heard in Advent Children, we heard in Distant Worlds, this time just very much in the background. I'll just play that section for you again, right here. It's so subtle. A short while later, we get a phenomenal evolution. Listen to the bass under this section the first time it's played, and then listen to the bass line as it climbs the second time. All one note. It's wonderful hearing what they've done to update some of these little bits, make them more tense, more kind of like it's building to something and then falling away again. There's constant, the ebb and flow in this piece. It's, there's a little bit of this, then it's up, then it's there again, it's up, it's all the way down, it's all over the place. It's phenomenal. We then get this incredible build from a low bass note, which I will reference back to shortly. But listen to how the menace here, and this is exactly what I was just talking about, leads to something quite unlike where you think it's going to go. And we're way back. That bass note hanging on under the beginning of the wind and the xylophone sounds dangerous. Once that's done, we go to a quiet section that we just heard, but even that doesn't last terribly long. Here's that bass note again for a second. And finally, we've heard Erstwans Interiors. Finally. These were iconic moments from the original, and the way that they're fed in and kind of drip-fed throughout this arrangement, just to give you an idea, we're almost 4 minutes through it at this point in time, that it's just masterful, and it brings us back to a familiar territory, only to slap us away again as we go into a new section. The way they play with it all is fantastic. Then we get this. Finally! 4 minutes and 5 seconds into this piece, we got what used to be the traditional introduction to this. It's kind of done a crisis core and slapped it way into the piece, although in this case, we're not even halfway through it yet. But it's a relief to anyone who knows the original. It kind of gives it back to us. Obviously, it's not where it was, but the fact that they kept it and put it later, to me at least, is a move of musical genius. Let me get this. The tension in this section just blows my mind. Ever since you get that brum figure into from the drums into the flutes. That brum. And then the flutes have this high tremolo that kicks in. And feel the brass building, not the bum bit, but underneath them. And then it's going to overpower them in a section. It's just wonderful. And then, after all of that, it gets us into this next section, which sounds like this. So here we finally get it in its entirety. Erstwans interiors ira vehementi sephiroth. this time, those heavy drums, the martial, they also keep a martial rhythm going. Like, you get the heavy beats, but there's something constantly going behind it. Much more terrifying. The brass feels more powerful, though I feel like that might not be if the mix were to be studied. I feel like it might actually be about the same as it was earlier on. It's just maybe even the same kind of roughly in the mix as the original, but everything is just feeling more potent at this point. I could go through this entire arrangement going into minutiae, but now that we've kind of heard all of that, that's not my purpose here. By giving all of these examples, I wanted to show kind of how cleverly the arrangement weaves in and out of what I would consider typical moments for One Winged Angel, or moments that came from the original, heading out each time either into something heavily modified or entirely new. This, I think, is that versatility. This is why I believe One Winged Angel has lasted so long, because you can do so much with it. They can bring it into a new game and they can change it to fit the vibe of the game without feeling like they have to go way off piece. Now, I want to jump ahead a little here to what was the most mind-blowing moment for me in this arrangement. This is where the arrangement knows it has gained your trust and it can go somewhere different. And the build-up to this is spectacular. Take note, as I play this, of the beginning of this section, how unsettling the syncopated strings are. I'll put little notes up here if I think about it to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. They play offbeat every single beat. How, when the repeat of the section you're about to hear kicks in, there's a massive bass drone that comes in, while the strings are basically flying all over the place with some really rapid bowing. And then how the trombone motif that we've been hearing creeps into the back of the arrangement. This da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'll mark all of this up on the screen if I can do. Just listen to all of that and listen to where it takes us. Drone comes in here. That moment, the standard battle theme that I was playing at the beginning. Do you remember? I told you to remember it. The da 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 da. That is the basic battle theme that I said earlier. You fight most of your battles in this game to that piece of music. Every non-critical battle of the game is there, and it's in this arrangement. It's a masterstroke. You're in a fight. It has every right to be there. But it's so completely unexpected because they've never done that before. They've never brought into this a piece of music that wasn't it. The presentation is somehow ridiculously triumphant. You get that lovely build-up, the beautiful chord up at the top there, and then a moment later we descend back into the cacophony. That sends chills up my spine every single time I hear it. Not quite as mind-melting as that, but they double down on that just a moment later. The boss battle theme too. Told you to remember that one as well. Just a single bar this time. The dum dum da da dum 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 da da dum bum. That's it. But my goodness, Sephiroth is a boss. Sure, this fits. You know, the inclusion of both of those fitting so naturally into the absolute glory of this arrangement firmed up all of my beliefs as to the versatility, as to the possibilities that you could present this with. That moment right there kind of inspired this entire video. I'd wanted to do something on One Winged Angel anyway, especially once I knew I was doing Video Game Month, but wow. Then they do it again! It's so much more subtle, but listen to the bass line here. Momentarily, but it's that bum, 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 ba 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 bum. It's another bit of the standard battle theme. It's the thing that you hear first out the gate. It's incredible how they made all of that work so fluidly while maintaining such a degree of chaos and stress in the music. It's absolutely nuts. And then to top all of it off, they finish with the most cacophonic 30 seconds of music. The chorus, the Veni 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 Us, and the Gloriosa Generosa, almost completely swallowed by the raucous brass that we get in front of them. But goodness, the end wouldn't be the same if they weren't there. Every element of this is needed, but this is frantic. What? Crazy. What is that? Wow! I'm sorry, I can't help but air conduct when I hear this piece, because it's just on another level. This, honestly, you don't realize when you're fighting Sephiroth in the game, when you're playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. When you're playing Final Fantasy VII, the original game, there's a slightly slower pace to it, and so you can take the music in. Plus, it's about 4.5 minutes long, and so you can listen to it about 4 minutes long, I think. You can listen to that repeat several times, and it kind of ingrains it itself in your head. So much is happening, and what we just listened to, that wasn't the whole piece, obviously, it's 10 and a bit minutes long. But at various points in there, it will repeat. There are actually 4 sections to that, and the ending is the only bit that stops. The other 3 can repeat. And so if you're in the middle of the fight and you haven't progressed to the part where it needs to move on to the next piece of music, it doesn't. Wonderful stuff. So with that, we come to the final subject for today, and this is the piece of music I have not heard until now. This is One Winged Angel Reborn, which is the version from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Makes me wonder if the third part of the trilogy is going to be Reborn. Although, didn't they call it... Was it Crisis Core Reborn? Anyway, it doesn't matter. From here on out, this is going to be like one of my regular reaction analyses videos. So a quick reminder, if you haven't seen one of those before, I'm going to watch, or listen in this case, to it through once the whole way through, and then I'm going to go back and try and break it down. Now, usually I do that with visuals as well as audio. This is going to be audio only. That's the only difference. So I will do the best I can. This one is much shorter. It's only 3 minutes long. And yeah, we'll see what happens. So without any further delay, let's listen to for the first time for me, to One Winged Angel Reborn. Even heavier! Whoa. That bass. Oh, key change. Well, this is a lot. Ooh, back down. Ooh. Oh, I love this. What? This is crazy. That's so good. This build. Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. I see, this is what I'm saying. They've changed it completely once again. They cut it in different places. They move things around a little bit, and it's still such an epic piece of music. That's incredible. I love that. I believe, because I unfortunately have spoiled a small amount of the music, at least for myself, I believe this also comes in the midst of a chunk. But the rest of the chunk isn't One Winged Angel, I believe. No spoilers, please. I do not want to know anything about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because I haven't played it yet. Nor Crisis Core, come to that. The Reunion Crisis Core. Oh no, it wasn't Reborn, it was Reunion. So yeah, it could still be Final Fantasy VII Reborn. Anyway, sorry, stuck on that. Yes, please don't even tell me if my guesses are correct about that, because this is literally the only piece of music I'm going to listen to of this voluntarily until I play the game. Wow, this is nuts. This is really, really good. Okay, let's go back. I'm going to listen to that again and make some comments as we go along. Straight off the bat, those notes are being held slightly longer, I think. There's a boom, boom, boom feel rather than a boom, 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 boom. Like there's a bit more kind of push to them, which is really cool. It kind of gives us a slightly different take on it. Interesting that having previously put that 4.5 minutes into an arrangement, now we're getting it here right at the front. And we don't get the dum 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 dum, which is what would happen there normally. We go straight into this next section. Like that transition right there. What was that? I like what we get here. This. Yeah, boom, blah. These two, like 3 or 4 octaves apart, boom, boom, up the top. These held tonic notes that are just going to hover in, and then we go into this collapse down the stairs, this sort of cascading sound. I love that with the da 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 da, and it's going to be the da 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 da, but we just get da 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 ba 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 ba, and down we go. Great stuff. What a fun choice. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Now, this has 2 things about it that I think are different. We've got this boom, this note down the bottom that is holding on and then really emphasized, where you get the Sephiroth, boom, comes back in really hard down the bottom. And these strings going crazy over the top of it, like going all over the place. Kind of, again, hyping up that tension of this particular piece of the song. It's really nice. those bass notes just really, they add threat to this. Like, this is what I think is so great about these arrangements, is they make Sephiroth... He was hard as nails in the original game, especially if you beefed him up by taking multiple parties against the previous version, but here, it's not that he sounds tough, he sounds scary. And he should be. Like, Cloud is not up to Sephiroth's level, none of your party are, when you first encounter him. Like, if you were actually fighting real Sephiroth and not a clone, I guess he leaves you with a bunch of Jenova. You don't really fight Sephiroth until the end. But, like, if you encountered real Sephiroth instead of a clone, and he chose to fight you, you would lose. Like, you just flat out wouldn't win that. There's even there's a flashback scene in the game where you see where Sephiroth has just found out... no, before that, when before he just finds out about the truth of how he was created, he's going there in a truck with several soldier members, and it gets ambushed by a dragon. And you and Sephiroth get out. It's the only time you ever control him in the game. And you two fight this dragon. And Cloud's doing sort of 14 damage to this thing. If the fire breath comes out of the dragon and hits Cloud, it does sort of, 400 damage or something. I can't remember exactly what. If the fire breath hits Sephiroth, it does nothing. And then he hits the dragon back for about 3,200 damage. This is what I mean when I say you cannot beat him at that point in the game. You have to go through the rest of the game to get strong enough to take him on. And this, especially because I don't know where this happens in the game. I don't know how this version of the game ends, especially because I know the plot goes so... like, it missed the trail a long time ago compared to where the plot went in the original game. They've really changed it, which is, I think, personally, really cool. I love the changes. Once I kind of stood back for a second and understood what was going on, I love the changes in the remake. So I'm excited to see what happens here. But whenever you fight Sephiroth, he should sound dangerous. And this music sounds dangerous. Oh, I love that so much. We get this key change up for this next section, and we get that bum bum ba ba bum 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 ba-da, which is the full form of that trombone version. When we last heard it right at the end of the Final Fantasy Remake version, you had it a little bit more... it finished differently at the end. This time we're getting it accurately. Then we get that same... that ba 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 ba, and again, nice syncopation there, this was from the original, but we kind of get it. But then you get that Sephiroth where it drops back down again to the key that we were in previously. That's really nice. I love that we elevated it for a moment and then we come back down. It changes the feel of the music at that point in time. There's something, it's not uplifting precisely, but it gives you something to kind of re-buoy your attention into the music. And then even when it comes crashing back down again, it's still kind of, you're energized by the fact that something has changed. This, I know exactly where we're going next. This section here where you get a boom, da 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 da. It's so, like, the legato strings, i.e. they're being played long notes, they're not choppy. Like, it gives this a moment of beauty to settle on. There's something lovely about that. And it's also... bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it's a flat 6. So we're in the flat 6 chord at that point in time, which is also a really nice chord to settle on because we can play the tonic note and it comes out as the third of that chord. Yeah. And I love right here, you get this boom, 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 very martial undertone, but then this it's giving me kind of Some Enchanted Evening vibes. Like there's sort of a dance to this that could be done. Really, really nice counterpoint between those two things kind of clashing against each other. And then I love that you almost don't hear what's going on. You just go boom, 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 and it kind of comes out as those trombones are kind of blasting out that, or French horns, I think, are blasting out that tune there. And there you can hear stuff going on, but it's kind of molded into the brass a little bit. The French horns are still playing, but they're playing something a little bit different. Everything's in that kind of lower register, these boom, boom, these big notes that are coming out. It's keeping it down there. Really, really effective. And I love that we get that bum 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 ba ba ba. I haven't had time to prepare, but I feel like that's from a different piece of music, but I might be incorrect about that. But I love that we have this da-da-da-da-da-da theme, which is very light and airy with the xylophone kind of playing in other versions. Here it's a little bit less on solid ground, I think. You've got this jump, 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 jump going underneath. And because it's climbing, it's not that bass line is kind of moving up with the piece of music. And yes, I know we've kind of gone into a slightly different key for a second as well. But because it's constantly moving and constantly rising, it's increasing the tension again. There's so much increase of tension in this. And then we get a variation on the Estuans interius ira vehementi, but we get it slightly differently. We get this interesting melody up top. With a ba 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 ba, like going up further each time we go up. That's really, really nice, because we're weaving in. We know that what happens next is Sephiroth if we're playing the original, but that's not what we're getting. We're getting something a little different. And oh my goodness, that time, and it just goes off somewhere sort of slightly melodically incoherent in a way that's really cool. It kind of takes it somewhere totally different. We already know that the energy is hyped because we're getting a much more kind of powerful version of that piece of music, that motif. But then for the melody line to go so astray. Oh, and again. That boom, which I think might be basses just bowing up the string as they go, double basses. Not 100% sure, but wow, what an effect that gives. That note just descending down behind the chorus. And now we have that da 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 da, that syncopated rhythm again going. It's slower, but because we have so much else going on, it's still kind of adding that pace that it added in the previous version where I was saying take a listen to this particular bit, where we had some syncopation there. And it's they are pushing us to the max at this point in time. Like, if you're fighting Sephiroth right now playing this, you've got to be sweating bullets at this point in time. And a lovely evolution here. We get this that the violins are playing now, like they're upping the ante. And now the violins are climbing all over the place while we have this boom, these brass hits again. I love that the brass has become such a powerful force for malevolence in these contemporary arrangements. They add so much. And right in the back there, am I hearing that right? I think there's a flute or a piccolo that's doing a right at the back of that. Yeah. Oh, this change here! Oh, this is so good. We have that bomb, 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 bomb. Like, the fact that it just hit bomb and stops straight away. My instinct was to look down going, are we coming to the end of the piece of music? Are we going to finish with that bomb, 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 bomb kind of thing? Which I think something does in Advent Children, if I remember correctly. Or there's something somewhere down the line that finishes with those chords and then just stops. But then we get this kind of electric, I feel like there's an electric guitar playing like a boom down the bottom, and out of that, muddied to begin with because there's other stuff going on, out of that crawl the double basses with the ba 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 right down the bottom. So good! How menacing is that? You can't really even hear bow sounds or anything like that. Like, all you hear is just these strings. Like, and almost all you can pick out is the is that it's that little bit right there, and it's that there's that Jaws thing coming back again. And we still have the timpani doing that bum bum with the bum 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 bum, which is the rhythm that they normally play, but the strings going crazy over the top of it. And everything just keeps going, and we now just pile the chorus on top of it. Oh. And I feel like they keep it going where previously every 2 repetitions, like, you'd have gloriosa, generosa, gloriosa, generosa, and then something would change. I feel like they do 4 in a row there, deliberately keeping it the same. And now the brass, we got a little bit ba ba ba. They've just added a couple of extra notes in there. And then you get this. That final one where you get the ba 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 ba. And again, it's long, it's legato, because that's how the choir's singing. They're not singing gloriosa, which would be perfectly fine, but they're singing gloriosa, and so the brass mimics that in what they're doing. And up to this point, that's how this piece of music, since Advent Children came out, this is how this piece of music ends. But actually, up to this point, that's how it ends. Oh, and with the final note hanging on at the end too. I think I cut that off before. But that, I love that. Actually, up to here, even. The ba 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 ba, but that's in it. But normally it's then just bomb, Sephiroth, and we're done. But I love that bomb, 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 down there in the bass. Then we get this thing. Oh, that lovely lead up from the strings, and then just the huge orchestra hits for the Sephiroth. Wonderful stuff. Wow, that version is good. I still think that Rebirth, One-Winged Angel Rebirth, which is from Final Fantasy VII Remake, might be my favourite version just because of how frenetic and nightmarish it sounds. This one, however, has absolutely lived up to the bar that they set there. It's just incredible. They did an amazing job, yet again, of making the One-Winged Angel into a new piece of music, and I don't know what this feeds out of. I may be even more amazed when I learn that. But anyway, that was truly awesome, and now I'm going to go and listen to it a bunch more times, because this is cool. Anyway, I hope I brought something to you in this video. Thank you so much if you are still here an hour and a half later. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this. I hope I was able to give you some perspective on one version or all versions of One Winged Angel. Maybe I brought you the song, you've never heard it before. Maybe I brought you Nobuo Uematsu. If I did, go and check out some of his other stuff. His game composition work is mind-blowingly good. But I hope that you enjoyed this. That's the ultimate thing. I want people to enjoy, and I want people to take something away from it, whatever that happens to be. Please do like the video, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and if you'd care to donate to support, you can do it here with the super thanks, or head over to buymeacoffee.com or patreon.com, and in both cases it's /DavidKReacts. That's it from me for now. I'm trying to remember where this video comes out in my sequence. I think I'm correct in saying you can expect another... Yes, this, unless something has gone wrong with my timing, this is a Wednesday. Another video for Video Game Month coming out on Friday. So I hope that you will join me for that. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me, especially on an experimental video. I really hope that you enjoyed this. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Are video essays a fun thing for me to do? I have one more planned, which is a different style again, but still a video essay. But let me know one other thing. I was toying with doing a video series on songs that inspired me, particularly. I sounded out the dozen or so people that were in my Patreon at the time where I thought about it, and they all said yes, but they're all obviously biased. So I'm asking you more generally, would you be interested in hearing, music that inspired me? This piece would have been the first one I did, except I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep... This would be a shorter series than my usual videos, in terms of length of video, and there was no way I was going to talk about One Winged Angel and keep it short, because there's so much context, but there's also so much to dig into with the different arrangements. So, but if that's something you think might be fun, that could be any kind of music at all that kind of I think about. I'm like, oh yeah, that inspired me. That made me think differently about music. Maybe they're 10-minute long videos. I don't know. But let me know if that's something that would interest you. And if so, maybe I'll do a few of those and see how they go. But as I said, thank you for sticking with me for something different. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, 7:39 p.m. I don't know. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.